Following on from the F7 class 242 tank engine, the next add-on released by Caledonia Works was another design that originated from the Great Eastern Railway. This is the J15 class 060 tender engine, and although I was initially on the fence with regards to this pack, I decided to pick it up anyway because I remembered my Hornby model of J15 number 7942, and how I liked the overall look of these little 060s. As a brief aside, and for the longest time, I didn't realise that the Locomotive in CW's logo is Cali 123. Makes sense if you ask me. But first, a brief history on the LNER J15, originally the Great Eastern Railway Y14. This class was designed by TW Worsdell to solve the GER's shortage of suitable freight locomotives, which resulted from the opening of the Great Northern and Great Eastern Joint Railway from Huntingdon to Doncaster via March and Lincoln. The Y14 class had an impressive total build-out of 289 locomotives, most of which were built at the Great Eastern's own Stratford Works, with the exception of one batch, comprising 19 locomotives, built by Sharp Stewart and Company of Manchester in 1884. Several batches of Y14s were built on a frequent basis between 1883 and 1892, by which time Worsdell had been succeeded as GER locomotive superintendent by James Holden. Holden tried to standardise the Y14 design with his own N31 class, but the N31s proved unsuccessful, so Y14 construction resumed in 1899. Further batches would be built in 1906, 1912, and 1913. A notable aspect of the Y14's design is her dome located very close behind the funnel, as opposed to the middle of the boiler. Some Y14s originally had a 3-ring boiler with a centrally located dome, but that variant is not included in this pack. Only the first 40 members of the class received air brakes along with the classy ultramarine livery, while the remainder were painted black and only fitted with steam brakes as they were intended solely for freight service. Apparently, the Great Eastern introduced their black livery in 1890, and it was exclusively applied to locomotives that only had steam brakes. 43 members of the class were loaned to the Railway Operating Division in World War I, and one of them, number 513, was withdrawn after returning from the ROD as she was too badly damaged from wartime service. Another 16 of her classmates were withdrawn before 1923, when the Great Eastern Railway became part of the London and North Eastern Railway. This was when the Y14s were reclassified as J15, and some of them were withdrawn while still wearing the ex-Great Eastern post-war grey, having never received proper LNER liveries. Starting in 1933, the LNER modified some J15s with a noticeably taller cab, but this project was completed in 1939 before all of the surviving J15s could be modified. Those that never received the taller cab were withdrawn, and all of those engines withdrawn at the time were only fitted with steam brakes. One member of the class, number 7690, gained notability from being sold into industrial service in 1938. She ran under her own power to her new home in Scotland, more specifically Coatesbridge, North Lanarkshire, and remained in service there until her withdrawal in 1960. The LNER had only 127 J15s left on their books by the time of nationalisation in 1948, but only 71 of them gained new numbers under British Railways, and out of those 71, 40 were the dual-braked engines, while the remaining 31 only had steam brakes. The final J15s were withdrawn in 1962, by which time the class had been in service for an impressive 73 years. Fortunately, one member of the class, 564, later BR 65462, has survived into preservation. Apparently, the original choice for preservation was actually 571, later BR 65469, but the Midland and Great Northern Joints Railway Society bought 564 because she was in a better condition than 571. CW released their LNER J15 add-on on the 1st of July 2026, and it's available to buy from their website for £20, or around 49 New Zealand dollars. 20 quid is generally the limit of how much I'm prepared to pay for a single TS Classic add-on these days. Due to being rather busy with the Merchant Navy and Clear Creek old-timer videos, not to mention other commitments and the rare visit from ETMs 526, 541 and 554, I didn't have time to finish the J15 video as well before going down country to chase JB 1236 on the North Island main trunk, but work resumed after the trip. This is not the first time the J15 has appeared in TS Classic, as there was a pack from JH 55000, or the Rustic Engineman, released sometime in the mid-2010s, but I never had that version. And I still don't. As a result, I can't do a side-by-side comparison between the two models, but what I can do is take you through the livery selection that's included with the CW pack. You get Great Eastern Railway Ultra Marine, GER Black, ROD Black, GER Wartime Grey, GER Post-War Grey, LNER Post-War Grey, LNER Lined Black 1923 to 1928, LNER Lined Black 1928 to 1933, as worn only by Locomotive 7567, LNER Unlined Black 1928 to 1936, War Department Black, as worn only by 2 members of the class, LNER Unlined Black 1936 to 1941, LNER Unlined Black 1941 to 1945, Bairds and Scottish Steel Limited No. 1, LNER Unlined Black 1946 to 1948, British Railways Unlined Black, and a one-off variant of BR Lined Black for the 1962 film The Postman's Knock. Seeing the sheer amount of variants included in the CW pack reminded me of how, in my opinion, it was a real shame that Hornby made comparatively few variants for their J15 models. Initially, they only made a small number of post-1928 LNER and BR variants, all with the taller cab, followed by one preservation variant many years later. Thinking back to the Bairds and Scottish Steel Limited livery, this one really caught my eye because I had no idea that any J15s had ever been sold into industrial service. By the way, this is the one that was originally LNER 7690. One can only imagine just how much effort goes into researching these things, and as one might expect, the file size for such a large pack as the J15 is, well, pretty high, at 3.86 GB. With that in mind, I can understand why there aren't any weathered variants included as standard. In saying that, and personally speaking, I'm not bothered by the lack of weathered variants, and I'll give Chris credit for not pulling a dovetail by splitting off liveries into other separate packs, and charging extra for the additional liveries. That's something I would often see DTG doing in the days when they still made add-ons for TS Classic themselves, although the only example that comes to mind at the moment is their re-release of the Iron Horse House Class 20. If memory serves, they also did this separately sold livery nonsense with the Class 31. The J15s are scripted with numerous customization options that can be changed in the scenario editor, although the amount of customization depends on the variant you choose. In this case, I'm doing a demonstration with the British Railways Unlined Black variant, on which you can change the tender decals to show either Gill Sans lettering, the early crest, or the late crest. And on this variant, you can also add or remove overhead warning stickers, change the side rods to be either plain or fluted, I prefer fluted myself. Oh, and you can also have the side rods red if you want to. Then you can also change the buffer shanks to be either plain or slightly beveled. And lastly, you've got 3 choices of funnel type, although the BR stovepipe funnel was only seen on J15s equipped with air brakes. In a manner reminiscent of CW's LNER J36 pack, the J15 has separate variants of each livery labelled with air or steam, depending on the braking setup. Seeing as I've known Chris to have a preference for focusing on the working days, I was pleasantly surprised to see that he's also included 7, lucky 7, preservation-era liveries for the J15, let alone any Pres liveries. The selection is as follows. 1967 blue, which I swear I remember seeing in an old book about British steam in the 60s. 1977 to 1981 grey. 1981 green. LNER black, 1982 to 1990. BR black, 2002 to 2011. LNER black, 2011 to 2013. And present-day ultramarine. The long gaps in those dates I mentioned line up with when the real locomotive was out of action for overhaul. If my research is correct, she has been out of action since 2024 after failing an annual boiler inspection. As for which preservation-era livery I like best, that's the 1981 green, although I can't quite pick what it is that I like about this livery. Just for the heck of it, here is a side-by-side comparison between the original and preservation variants of Great Eastern Ultramarine, easily my favourite livery in the pack. Feel free to play Spot the Differences with these 2 variants. The Y14 pack is built on SimNation's Locomotion 2.0 scripting, so she is right up to date in terms of features. The list includes, but is not limited to, the option to change between simple and advanced driving modes by pressing Ctrl A, with simple mode disabling the reverser lock and steam chest simulation, 3D firebox and coal, fire intensity synchronized with the exhaust beat, dynamic particle effects, a customizable headlamp arrangement on both the locomotive and tender, realistic performance physics, realistic steam chest simulation, scripted tender tank and water level, with water visible sloshing about inside the tender, scripted air brakes where applicable, adjustable safety valve and Westinghouse air pump volume, animated valve gear inside the frames, numerous cab camera views, and authentic sounds supplied by Steam Sound Supreme, having been recorded from the preserved Y14 in real life. I am of the opinion that the sound set is generally decent, although there is a noticeable loop in the chuffing audio at around 58 miles per hour. If nothing can be done about that, so be it. Your mileage may vary, but personally, I'm so well accustomed to driving locomotives with vacuum or air brakes, and leaving the brakes in running as I'm going along, that I sometimes get caught off guard when I drive an engine that only has steam brakes, be that a J15 or the previously mentioned J36. As for what Kingfisher the A4 is doing here, your guess is as good as mine. Anyway, as for why I get caught off guard, this is because I have a tendency to instinctively move the brake lever to what I think is the running position, only to suddenly remember that the steam brakes don't have a running position. Meanwhile, the regulator feels neither too heavy and slow moving, or too sensitive to keyboard inputs. In other words, it's just right, like how the three bears wanted their porridge. And now for that traditional part of a TS Classic review where I see just how fast a given locomotive can go. In this case, I ran the preserved Y14 on the old Barnstaple to Exeter route from DP Simulations, starting at Portsmouth Arms and finishing at Barnstaple, with a short, but nonsensical looking, passenger train in tow. Why I included a towed brake van in the consist is anyone's guess. In any case, I got the Y14 up to an absolute top speed of 64.2 miles per hour on level track, with that speed being reached between Chapelton and Barnstaple. To add, the Y14/J15's ideal fire mass is around 880 pounds, and if you maintain it at around that level, the locomotive will be right as rain when it comes to steaming. I suggest keeping a close eye on the fire mass when you're shoveling, so as not to smother the fire. As I have come to expect from CW, the J15 is a pretty well made product, to the point where I haven't had any major issues with this thing. Although I do have one small critique in the form of this cab front window that phases through the whistle chain. As for any other suggestions for improvements, the only one of which I can think is an additional position for the cab camera view further back on the running board, thus allowing the player to get a close-up look at the animated valve gear. If that was to be added, I suggest adding the camera view on the opposite side of the locomotive from the reverser rod. And there you have it. A look over what you'll get for your money in the new LNER J15 add-on from Caledonia Works. As mentioned, there are a couple of small things that could be improved, but on the whole, this is still a very solid pack for what it is, to the point where I'll give it 8 out of 10. Much like the Great Western locomotive called Galloping Gertie, the J15 is content with pottering along at around 24 miles per hour with a short or medium length train, although, as shown earlier on the run from Portsmouth Arms to Barnstaple, she's also quite a nippy little thing. Considering the amount of work that would have gone into making all the liveries and variants for this pack, here's hoping that it sells well. Same goes for CW's upcoming 010 Big Bertha. I also hope that this video can help potential customers to make an informed choice as to whether or not they buy the J15 for themselves. If you've stuck around to the end of the video, you win a Japanese-built car that doubles as a musical instrument famously played by Weird Al Yankovic. It's the Honda Accord, Ian.